Happy New Year and welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you're here today. I'm going to discuss my top jazz vinyl finds of 2023, and I have quite a few things here to go over with. But the first thing I wanted to address is all these records that I'm going to show you I found in record stores. I don't think I ordered one of these off eBay or Discogs or anything. I found them all in record stores. And granted, here in New York City we have lots of record stores, but I urge you to support your local record stores. The whole reason we have Record Store Day is because record stores stuck it out to have it. They're the ones who created it, along with the Record Store Day people. And that's why it's gotten bigger and bigger every year, as has the vinyl resurgence. Every year it's bigger and bigger. And it always cracks me up when I see these articles, wow, this vinyl thing is really here, or, you know, the 10 best new vinyl starter kits. You know, every form of media wants to get in on this, but it's really been going on since about 2008. And if you get out and you shop in stores, you'll find things you didn't know existed, which is about half of what I'm going to show you here. I didn't even know these records were even made, because so many records have been made from the 50s up through the 80s of limited pressings that just came and went. Maybe some were only distributed in urban centers. So there's a wealth of records out there to find. And all of these records I'm going to show you have not been reissued. I have a couple Blue Notes here that have been reissued, but by and large, these are unreissued records. And that's part of the thrill of the hunt, the thrill of the dig, to go to a store you've never been to before and see what they have, because you never know what you'll find. I know in our Jazz Vinyl Lovers group, or even when people respond to my videos, they talk about, you know, finding a strange record in some out-of-the-way place. So, and that's, to me, that's the joy of this lifestyle, of this hobby, is finding a record I've never seen before. You know, we live in a golden age of reissues, from Tone Poets to what Kraft is doing, the OJCs, all the stuff Chad Kasem is doing, and that's really, really great, even though for my money, by and large, the UHQR Coltrane was pretty amazing, as was the Steely Dan Asia, but by and large, for me, you know what I'm going to say, reissues do not sound as good as original or early pressings. That's another story. But, you know, on one hand, you can sit in your chair and be an armchair traveler, and that's really great. Check out tracks on streaming services to see what you want to buy. But I urge you to hit the stores. It's fun. You'll make friends. There's a great store I go to. It's two in New Jersey. Princeton Record Exchange, obviously, which I really have a Jones to go to, if I could find the time. And Darren Revilla Grooves and Gear, which is an amazing store in this little out-of-the-way town, a little main street in, forgot the name of the town in New Jersey, but he gets amazing collections. He also sells gear. It's a great thrill to go out there. I just wish there was a bar in walking distance. Well, there is actually. So I get my records, I walk down the block, I go to the bar, look at my records, and I usually have new sleeves. That's part of the fun of the whole thing. But anyway, yeah, I just want you to support your record stores. First up, let's start with this great record from 1962 called All Night Long. This is a soundtrack recording to a film of the same name, produced in Britain, 1962, and the film is based on Shakespeare's Othello, oddly enough. So, but what's so great is it's mostly like a play. It's set in a loft. Richard Attenborough plays the actor who it's his home. He's having everybody over to play music, and the musicians include, and they're actually playing, Dave Brubeck, Tubby Hayes, John Dankworth, Charles Mingus, Alan Gailey, Bert Courtley, I guess these are British guys, Johnny Scott, Keith Christie. This is a beautiful Fontana sleeve, and it's a great recording. Never been reissued, maybe on CD, but it's really, really a fun record. And I've included music clips for almost all of these, so you can check it out a little bit to see if you'd like to buy it. Next up, from 1972, 10 years later, Shelly Man, . Now this is a weird record. You know, Shelly was one of the most open-minded drummers in jazz, one of the most recorded drummers in jazz, and just always a positive force for jazz and for swing. And this record is just bizarre. It's on the Mainstream label. I have a few other records here from Mainstream, one of these small New York labels that came and went. Even the cover is weird. You know, there's the man, woman, the weird signs for kind of outdated for genders, but the back cover is weird. He's wearing like a freaky polyester shirt. You can see his sticks. And this is mostly a band of young musicians who I'd never heard of before, except for Mike Wofford on piano, John Morell on guitar, Gary Barone on flugelhorn, John Gross on saxophone, who's that? Jerry Castleman, Brian Moffat on percussion. I've heard of him before. And this is an experimental, weird, funk-based record. And Shelly, as well as playing drums, is playing berimbau, waterphone, cuica, super balls on cymbals. So it's a really unusual record. The percussionist is playing ray gun, whistle, siren ring, sheet of tin, bowed flexitones, shaker sticks, maracas, toys, slide whistles. It's just a really fun record. Never been reissued. Mainstream is ripe to be reissued by Jazz Dispensary or one of these labels. You know, I like some of the Jazz Dispensary stuff. Actually, some of it's really, really great. But this is a fun record. Shelly Man, 1972, Mainstream 375. Next up, from Jackie McLean, 1965 and 1961 respectively, Jackie McLean Alto Madness on Status, which was originally a Prestige title, and Jackie McLean Lights Out on New Jazz, which was originally a Prestige title from 1956. Jackie McLean is one of the richest musicians in jazz, and I don't mean monetarily. He had so much to offer. He has such a huge imagination, whether you go back to his early Prestige stuff or his incredible Blue Note catalog, which includes favorites of mine like Destination Out, Jackknife, Demon's Dance. Demon's Dance really came out. That's a great Tone Poet reissue. I'm so glad they did that. You know, some Tone Poets sound fantastic. The Schizophrenia I thought sounded better than my original pressing of Schizophrenia. But just like Rudy Van Gelder was always experimenting, every Blue Note record sort of sounds different. Every Tone Poet sounds different, even though there is sort of an overwhelming consistency to their sound. I digress. Alto Madness includes John Jenkins on alto sax, Wade Legg on piano, Doug Watkins bass, Arthur Taylor drums. This is just a great early hard bop record with his amazing tone. Lights Out, equally amazing cast. Donald Byrd, Elmo Hope, Doug Watkins, Arthur Taylor. They really just switched out pianist and an alto sax for a trumpet player. But once again, I just found these at a store. The earlier pressings are Prestige, but these are the reissue series. These have RBG, blue labels, and they're just fantastic examples of his early work. And really, you know, he's interesting. He's part of the Out cadre on Blue Note that includes Grashan Mancour, Tony Williams' first couple albums, Sam Rivers with Contours and Fuchsia Swing Song. His records, it's funny, they start out on Blue Note and they're very hard bop, stuff like Bluesnik. But as he progresses, he gets a lot more progressive in his playing and in his compositions. One of the great artists in jazz, and I think doesn't get enough love on Blue Note because people are so enamored of Hank Mobley and Lee Morgan, as am I. Those are beautiful recordings. I have a Lee Morgan here I'm going to talk about. But Jackie McLean is one of the great inventive composers in jazz and also went on to teach later at Hartford University, I believe. Check it out. Next up, a Japanese pressing on Bay State from Max Roach and M. Boom from 1973, a live recording. Max Roach, Roy Brooks, Joe Chambers, Omar Clay, Warren Smith, Freddie Waits. What's really interesting is if you think about it, it's weird. You know, Freddie Waits, great jazz drummer, played on a number of Blue Note things, also did Motown work. His son, Nasheed Waits, is now one of the foremost drummers in jazz, works with a lot of ECM people. Just a great straight-ahead drummer. Straight-ahead's the wrong word. Straight-ahead's the wrong word for any modern-day jazz drummer, unless we're talking about Bill Stewart or Kenny Washington very much in that pocket. But a lot of these guys have encapsulated that in a lot of other musical styles. We also have Roy Brooks on this album, whose last Record Store Day release a couple years ago made people reevaluate him as a drummer and a leader. It's a great picture of Roy Brooks in the back. All great photos of all those guys. The M Boom record on CBS is pretty easy to find, and it's just okay. And this is pretty good, but the best M Boom record is on Black Saint Soul Note. It's an amazing record. It's an amazing recording. But whenever I see a record like this, because I was a drummer, I want to hear it. And the great Joe Chambers, who's still with us, still recording for Blue Note. I don't know Omar Clay. I have a couple Warren Smith records, which are really fantastic. So check it out. Next up, David Toop, Pink Spirit Noir World, not a jazz recording. This was originally released in 1997. He had a great book out. I forgot the name of it. I have it somewhere. That really dealt with ambient music and electronic music and folkloric music, very much in a British way, I suppose, like Simon Reynolds or somebody would. He was also a musician, and this is just a really beautiful ambient record. Pink Spirit Noir World, but it's all musicians. I think almost nothing is programmed. With musicians I don't know at all. Well, Scanner on computers, he was the name back then. The great John Hassel on trumpet, Talvin Singh on tablas. Anyway, but Pete Lockett is on this, and this is just a really cool ambient record. Maybe ambient's not your thing, but I was really happy to find it. You know, if you find some Blue Note UA monos, they can be very expensive now because some of them are made from the original metalwork, and some of them sound fantastic. And this is one of those. Johnny Griffin, A Blowing Session. The Blue Note UA came out in 1972. The original version came out in 1954. This is an absolute blowdown of a record. Johnny Griffin, another guy who doesn't seem to get enough love on Blue Note. Tell me if I'm wrong. Am I wrong? He had A Blowing Session, he had The Congregation, he had a great pairing later on with Eddie Lockjaw Davis, and this is just a murderous record with Lee Morgan, Johnny Griffin, Hank Mobley, John Coltrane, Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, Art Blakey. A Blowing Session. This thing just from the get-go blows the walls down. It's just a beautiful record. I was really happy to find it. This has probably been reissued as a Tone Poet or Music Matters. Well worth checking out. Next up, I was really happy to find out of Double Decker Records in Pennsylvania a couple 10-inch records by the great guitarist Johnny Smith. Was such a consistent musician and apparently a really good dude. Just a beautiful sound, pristine, sort of like Jim Hall, but a bigger sound. He played this big giant Guild guitar. You can sort of see it there. Just beautiful tunes, great covers of standards, very straight in a way. But this is 1952 on Roost, really early. Roost, another amazing label, bunch of Johnny Smith records, the Beverly Kinney records on Roost, just amazing. If you see a Roost record, it'll be cheap as dirt. Pick it up. And if you're lucky, it'll be in good shape. But they're just so, they're pristine, sublime recordings of very straight, for the time, jazz. Sort of coming out of big band, not too beholden to bebop, pre-hard bop, but really beautiful stuff. I was happy to find these jazz at NBC and in a sentimental mood. I bought these two Cannonball Adderley records not knowing they were the same record. One's the original presenting Cannonball Savoy MG12018. Check out that beautiful cover with Nat Adderley, Kenny Clark, Hank Jones, Paul Chambers. Good God Almighty, what a lineup. Now something is itching for a reissue, a modern reissue. This is it. But then they reissued it again in the 70s with a different cover. Both have RBG stamps. I haven't compared the two pressings, but Savoy is ripe to be reissued. Chad, are you listening to me, baby? It's funny, I noticed going through all these and making notes, in the second here I'm going to present a lot of R&B influenced guitar records. You know, 60s was the decade of the guitar. Jimi Hendrix, George Harrison, a little bit later on Duane Allman, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, and that definitely influenced all the jazz cats, and I don't mean as far as their styles. Jim Hall, Wes Montgomery, Johnny Smith, Grant Green, of course, all these wonderful guitar players who in turn influenced the dudes from the 90s, Bill Frisell, Wes Montgomery, and Pat Metheny. I'm a huge Pat Metheny fan. This is Day Trip, Tokyo Day Trip Live. This is Japan only vinyl. This has not been reissued. This is not ECM, this is non-such, but you know, Metheny's first 2 or 3 records, more than that on ECM, are just dying to be reissued. I don't know what ECM's problem is. They've started leaking a little bit of reissue stuff, which is great. They've done a couple of great titles. But this is a blast. I saw this trio. It's Pat with Christian McBride and Antonio Sanchez. I saw them the same year at a college in New York. I interviewed them for the cover story of Downbeat that year. This is 2009. But it's just, it's all Pat's tunes. I don't think there are any standards. It's 3 LPs. I think I paid $100 for this, which is fine with me because you'll never see this record anywhere. Pat's way into the artwork. He did, you know, all of Metheny's covers are collages, and they're all his collages. But he obviously didn't paint this. But these are just great live recordings of this immaculate, wonderful trio. And it also came with the CD, which was released domestically. 1977, on the Finite label, a pure Loft-inspired free jazz record, including Alex Foster on drums and Alex Foster on sax and John Lewis on drums. Alex Foster was a serious New York cat. You know, he was in the Saturday Night Live band for quite a while. I don't know what happened to him. And I have no idea who John Lewis on drums is. No idea. Now, there was the drummer when Lenny White and Steve Gadd left Chick Corea, and I think there was a drummer named, might have been this guy. But anyway, this is just balls to the wall free jazz. But because Alex Foster had played R&B, there's a lot of grounding. And even though it's like merciless, knife edge, kick-ass free, it's also pretty grounded. And it's funny, side 1, the first track is A Taste for Elvin Jones. Side 2, Snap, Crackle, and Pop, referring to Roy Haynes, obviously. But I think I paid $10 for this record. If you're like me, there are certain people you'll see, you'll buy the record if they're on it, or a certain instrument or a certain style, even if you don't know it. That's what I was saying. That's part of the hunt. I paid 10 bucks for this, I think, at Academy. Just, and definitely not reissued. Probably printed like 200 copies. And it's just a fun record. In that same vibe, another Japanese record, Milford Graves, Meditation Among Us, 1977, with a Japanese quartet. David Baker recorded it. Thought it opened it up, but it didn't. Are there pictures in here? Oh yeah, they're nice pictures. I've listened to the record. I haven't really bothered much with it. Looking at the sleeves, has a nice insert. Great picture of Milford. Band includes Milford, Motaro Taguchi on tenor sax, Kare Abe on alto, Toshinori Kondo on trumpet, and another drummer, Toshuku Toshitori on percussion and drums. You know, as I've said before, Milford Graves is like taking a bath or diving into a sandstorm. But his drumming and his, even though it's totally free, is so organic, and there's so many sounds from nature. It's almost like being in a rainforest, because there's just so many beautiful sounds sort of floating and bombastic and coming out of nowhere. He was such a force. You know, he studied heart rhythms. He taught at Bennington College. He was a super intellectual, but also very grounded. His drumming is so earthy and beautiful. Great stuff. This is a record I've been looking for ever since I heard it over at John DeVore's Monkey House. Cannonball Adderley Quintet and Orchestra from 1970. Now this is Cannonball along with Lalo Schifrin, William Fisher, and David Axelrod, the producer, responding to everything that happened in the 60s. Bitches Brew, free jazz, politics. This is a wild record. It's epic performances, large scale arrangements, has poetry, funny titles. Character A, dressed in formal attire including swallowtail coat, wide brim pork pie hat, long chain from watch fob to pocket, must stand with left shoulder lower than right. Advice without consent? None. But this will, if you think of Cannonball Adderley as just the guy who blew that incredibly happy alto with Miles or on his own records, this will change your way of thought. He made records in the 70s I haven't really listened to, but I think they're more just soul and R&B oriented. But this one is just an epic commentary on everything political and musical that happened in the 60s. And it's literally 3 tunes. Side 1's Experience in E by Joe Zawinul and William Fisher. Side 2, Density by David Axelrod. Also on side 2, Dialogues for Jazz Quintet and Orchestra by Lalo Schifrin. Now, both Schifrin and Axelrod, major soundtrack composers who did so much amazing work in the 60s. Axelrod did a lot of really strange things that I'm not really that aware of, but Schifrin did obviously Bullet, Steve McQueen, Manne. He did so many amazing jazzy soundtracks. He did the early Dirty Harry records. So I was really happy to find this, the Cannonball Adderley Quintet and Orchestra on Capitol Records from 1970. I posted in my Jazz Vinyl Lovers group just recently, I'm not a big fan of the jazz trombone. Who do you like? And we got like 100 responses, people who sang who they liked. Well, one guy I really dig all the time is Benny Green. This is an unreleased Blue Note. It came out on Blue Note Toshiba EMI from 1985, the 45 sessions, not 45. Benny Green is sort of an older world of jazz. It's easy swing, it's groove. He sings on some of it, or Bob Gonzalez sings on some of it. Benny Green, Eddie Williams on tenor, Sonny Clark on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, Jerry Siegel on drums. It's just his music just feels so good. There's a couple on Prestige as well. They're not real adventurous, they're not really hip or modern, but they feel really great. They're really soulful records. And again, I just stumbled into this somewhere. Blue Note BNJ 6120. And it's a great record. It's so much fun. In that same mode from 1984, I did find, this is the Jazz Record Center, the other side of Blue Note 1500 series. This is all unreleased tracks from records you know well, by the likes of Fats Navarro, Bunny Powell, Kenny Dorham, Herby Nichols, Lee Morgan, Cannonball Adderley, Blue Note 61008 to 10. There's a great website that lists the lineage of Blue Note reissues. Japan were the first to do reissues of Blue Note material, first with Toshiba EMI, then King got the right, then Toshiba EMI took it back. But this is a good example of that. It sounds pretty great. Japanese Blue Notes obviously sound very different from domestic Blue Notes, even though this website, JP Microgroup I think it is, said that the original Blue Notes that put out by Toshiba EMI were not Japanese. Blue Note would send the records over, and then they would create their own packaging. So if you get an early Toshiba, it should have an RBG on it. It's an American pressing. I just learned that recently. But this has great liner notes. And the whole package was put together by Michael Kuskuna, Discovering Blue Note. And the liner notes are in Japanese and English. And this is just a blast. All these alternate takes. Kenny Burrell, Johnny Griffin, Paul Chambers, Johnny Griffin, Lee Morgan, Lewis Smith, Thad Jones. So I was really happy to get my hands on this. Really fun. There's no sample on this because you know what Blue Note records sound like. Similar, but much, much, much earlier, from 1968, Blue Note Jazz, Stereo NP 920C. It's got the beautiful embossed gold Blue Note logo on the back. You can tell it's had better days, but I was psyched to get this. And I took this over to Alex Halberstadt's. This is 3 LPs, and this is sort of a greatest hits of Blue Note in 1968. So this may be pre-Toshiba. I don't know who put this out. Look, Toshiba Musical Industries. Folster. You can always tell it's much darker. The Blue Note label contrast. But, this doesn't really sound that great from an audio quality. It's a little splashy, and the bass is a little, I don't want to say distorted, but big and fat. But I was just happy to get a hold of this, just something really different. And I love Blue Note as much as the next guy, and this was a great find. Then I have 3 more Blue Note comps I found. I hope this doesn't bore you too much, but I had fun with these. This is Modern Jazz King. I'm not sure which year exactly. Trademarks owned by United Artists Music and Records Group and used by King Records on the authorization made in Japan. Entirely in Japanese. This one sounds great. Similarly, the World of Jazz Sax, Liberty King, the World of Jazz Piano, Liberty King, or Jazz Guitar rather. I have the World of Liberty Piano here too somewhere. But those are really neat. Now we start getting into the mid-70s through late 70s jazz guitarists, mostly in the Northeast, mostly guys who came up playing with organists, all very soulful, all very funky. I think you all know the name of Calvin Keys, Criss Cross, on Ovation Records from 1976. He had a couple records, and he played on other people's records on the Strata Jazz label, or on Black Jazz rather. And this is a very progressive jazz fusion record. Charles Owens on woodwinds, Kirk Lightsey on electric piano, Henry Franklin on bass, Oscar Brashear on trumpet, and Dougal Leon Chancellor on drums. And it's just, he's a smoking guitar player. But he made a bunch of records, and this is a really funky, progressive jazz level. He's playing a lot of really cool shit. Some of it reminds me of Kevin Eubanks, or maybe a really excited Pat Martino, but a really cool record. Shawnee on Black Jazz. This is a very popular record. He's just as great on this. Odonna Levy from 1977. Time has changed. Now I have a couple of his other records, and this is a little more commercial sounding. His other stuff, the earlier stuff on Groove Merchant, is more earthy and funky, but another beautiful guitar player. You know, these young black dudes coming up in urban centers who were into jazz, but also heavily influenced by soul and R&B. It's a great period. People say there's no jazz in the U.S. in the 70s. It's just nonsense. There was so much funky stuff happening. He put out a bunch of great records. He came up playing with Jimmy McGriff, Herbie Mann, Richard Groove Holmes, and this is just a fun, shit-quaking record. And the weirdest thing about this record, I don't know most of the musicians on here, except for Robert Wyatt on drums. Yes, that Robert Wyatt, who went on to play with Soft Machine, who then went on to like do kind of sort of absurd ambient music, I believe. He's a real trailblazer and highly valued in the UK. I don't know much about him. He just died recently. He played on a Mary Halverson record not that long ago. She was a big fan of Robert Wyatt, but I was just shocked to see him on here. And a lot of this is pretty simplistic, but there are a couple tunes. There's a lot of shit going on, man, and really dynamic, heady arrangements. And Robert Wyatt is kicking ass on those tracks. So, 1977, TK Productions. Odonna Levy, Time Has Changed. In that same vein, Antiguan guitarist Roland Prince just passed in 2016. This guy made some really cool records, and this record has an amazing lineup on Vanguard, which was never a fully committed jazz label. They had some Larry Coryell records, they had some Melvin Jones records, maybe some Paul Horn records, maybe some Colin Walcott records, but I think of Vanguard as a folk label. But obviously they're probably based in New York. Yep, 71 West 23rd Street. So they did Jazz Guys. And Roland Prince, this is a really funky, soulful record, but the lineup will blow your mind. Randy Brecker, Joel Farrell, Kenny Barron, Frank Foster, who shreds on this record, Bob Cranshaw, Al Foster on drums, John Hicks on piano, Eddie Moore on drums, Buster Williams on bass. This is a first-rate crew. And Roland Prince, he's on like 7 or 8 Elvin Jones records. He was in Roy Haynes' band. He played with David Murray, a really progressive guy who sometimes plays faster than he can actually play, trying to get across the neck. But this is the most soulful of these. Well, that's not really true. This is the most funky, perhaps, of these 70s era black jazz guitarists. And I just love the whole vibe on these things because they're funky, they're happening, great improvisations. There's a real looseness to the music. Hello, no click track. But a really fun record. one of the most recorded guitarists of the whole 70s scene. This is the debut of Melvin Sparks, Sparks, from 1970 on Prestige. With Virgil Jones, John Manning, Houston Person, Leon Spencer, and Idris Muhammad on drums. And this is just a really funky, churning, in the pocket. Melvin Sparks, who's still alive, I believe, has a big, fat, liquid tone. These other guys, their tone is not quite as fat as his. But again, he came up playing with organ cats. And this is just a super funky record. If you see any records by any of these guys in your stores, they'll be cheap. I grab them. They're really funky. They're great, great records. They're not worth a lot, but eventually they will be. Another Jackie McLean record, Right Now, Larry Willis, Bob Cranshaw, Clifford Jarvis. This is a 66 Liberty copy. I'm sure it's been reissued. This is more progressive Jackie McLean, playing his butt off, with tunes by Larry Willis, Charles Tolliver, and Echo. The title track's by Charles Tolliver. Just a great, you can't go wrong with any Jackie McLean, really. A 1960s reissue on the New York Blue Note New York label of the Herby Nichols Trio. This has been reissued very recently. I don't have it, I can't compare it. But Herby Nichols was a force of nature, kind of a sad force of nature. Had his own, you know, bohemian style. What a beautiful cover by Reed Miles. Just great, the epitome of a great early Blue Note. Originally a 1500 series. Another really amazing Blue Note record, an early Blue Note record by Lee Morgan. Leeway. I think this is the first Lee Morgan album I ever heard and I was hooked. I love the early ones. Indeed. There's the one where he's sitting in front of a circus or something with all these lights. And these are just, you know, he plays beautiful solos. Such a lyrical player. Such a beautiful player. This is with Jackie McLean, Bobby Timmons, Paul Chambers, Art Blakey, Leeway. I just love this record. This is a 60s Liberty reissue, which these things are commanding serious money these days, and this sounds fantastic. These are two original pressings. Horace Parlan Movin' and Groovin', Blue Note 4028, and Horace Parlan Up and Down, 84082. Movin' and Groovin' features his trio, Sam Jones, Al Harewood. Up and Down Booker Urban, Grant Green, George Tucker, Al Harewood. For my money, this one is more fun. They are just, you know, Horace Parlan is sort of the epitome of soul jazz. You can tell he comes out of gospel. Just a beautiful player. I think he was missing a couple fingers, or he had a problem on one of his hands. So you can hear him sort of thinking, but boy, he went some beautiful places. Such a soulful, swinging pianist. Again, anything Horace Parlan on Blue Note is great. And he also did records on Steeplechase, some other labels, but he's really a star on these records. As you can see, I paid $150 for one and $100 for the other because they're not in perfect shape. But boy, they sound great. Next to last, a really strange record, not that strange, but unusual that I found, by trumpeter Joe Newman, best known in Count Basie's band, Rompin' with the Count's Men. Frank West, Frank Foster, Benny Powell, Sir Charles Thompson, Ed Jones, Shadow Wilson. I love Shadow Wilson. What a great drummer that guy was. Joe Newman records, I paid $1.35 for this freaky acid dropping cover. Another one on Concert Hall Swing. There were all these weird labels that put out just a few records. You know, he probably got enough money to go buy some drinks. But this is a really fun classic record. You can check out the music samples. And this is a record I just took a chance on. And boy, what just a pleasurable swing-based record. Then finally, a tenor player really lost to the ages, Hadley Caliman, who played with Gerald Wilson's big band, played with some records with Joe Henderson, and these are really adventurous records. And has a very striking presence with that afro. He almost looks Native American Indian. These records are on Mainstream from the mid-70s, and the one record is pretty good. 318, I don't know any of these players. Bill Douglas, Clarice Benton, Larry Vukovich, I know Larry, piano player. Produced by Bob Shedd. These Mainstream records are all great. They sound very immediate. You can tell it's a small studio somewhere in New York. But he's really part of that early 70s things like Woody Shaw and Joe Henderson. He's really pushing. He's going somewhere different, and you can hear it. And shit is evolving. And he's got a great big sound. And the second one, Iapetus, this is a great record that needs to be reissued. Hadley Caliman, Woody Theus, who was a amazing young drummer. Lenny White was a big fan of his. I think he played with an early rendition of Weather Report. But he was one of these young cats in New York who's just absolutely on fire. At the same time, Billy Cobham was on fire, Lenny White, Alphonse Mouzon. Also on the bed, Tan Cochran, Louis Gasca, Hungria Garcia, Todd Cochran. You can see Woody Theus there. And once again, this is one of these 70s records that is, you know, you hear Coltrane, you hear funk and fusion, but it's still fully acoustic music, and it's totally pushing forward. So hey, thanks for watching my video.